A new feature allows you to use Claude Cowork while you're not at your computer. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief Headlines Edition, all the daily AI news you need in around 5 minutes. One of the interesting ways that you can tell what's really important to AI builders and people on the front lines is when there's a story that on the surface looks fairly small, but which is getting a disproportionate share of the conversation in AI circles. Our first story today is exactly that. On the surface, it's just a simple new feature for Claude Cowork. In this case, it's called Dispatch, and it allows you to bring your Claude Cowork with you on the go. That said, based on the reaction, 3 million views on the announcement tweet, 9,000 bookmarks, this one is a big deal to people. In the wake of OpenClaw, companies in the agent space have either been A, releasing their own versions of OpenClaw, that was obviously the topic of our show yesterday, or they've been slowly adding the important features of OpenClaw to their existing product suites, which has been, of course, Anthropic's approach. A couple weeks ago, we got remote control for Claude Code, which allowed users to initiate Claude sessions on their computer and then carry them onto their mobile devices where they could control them doing whatever it was that they were doing, basically coding from the gym. Dispatch is basically that, but for Cowork. The Cowork sessions are still hosted in a sandbox on your computer, meaning Claude still has the same access and protections. However, you can now kick off a Cowork session and then continue monitoring progress and providing approvals while out and about. Anthropic described the feature as like having a walkie-talkie for communicating with Claude. Cowork developer Felix Reisberg wrote, "It feels pretty magical to give Claude a mission on my computer and get occasional updates like creating reports from internal dashboards or finding me a better seat on my next flight. Everything Claude can do on your computer, files, browser tools, are reachable from wherever you go." First impressions are good. Daniel San writes, "Testing Cowork from my phone. The walkie-talkie analogy is spot on. Your phone becomes a remote control that talks to Claude running on your desktop. One more to the weekend testing list. Stay tuned, post incoming on how it works." Ethan Malik writes, "After using it a bit, Claude Cowork Dispatch covers 90% of what I was trying to use OpenClaw for, but feels far less likely to upload my entire drive to a malware site." He continues, "What I like better: easy, much more stable and safe. Existing connectors mean better integration with Gmail, browsers, etc. Very good tool use. What is missing for me? Ability to invite Claude to any channel, the heartbeat and proactivity, and multiple sessions. Right now, Dispatch is one chat." Now, for hardcore OpenClaw users, all of those things would be deal breakers, but this isn't necessarily about converting hardcore OpenClaw users. It's about bringing those types of feature sets to the full spectrum of tools for all the different types of agent users. Indeed, I think Powell Huron gets it right when he writes, "The bigger story, code, Cowork, web, and now Dispatch are all converging towards the same thing, a persistent AI layer that follows you across devices and contexts." I think that is exactly right. This claudification that we keep talking about is actual just form factor adjustments as everyone figures out the right way for people to interact with agents across a variety of different use cases and behavior patterns. Speaking of OpenClaw, one of the things that we've been tracking is the rise of OpenClaw in China. You might remember seeing a bunch of viral videos about people standing in line to get access to their first OpenClaws, supported by some of the big Chinese tech companies, but apparently the Chinese government is now growing concerned. In recent weeks, regulators warned staff at government agencies and state-owned enterprises of the dangers of OpenClaw and advised them not to install the agent. This seems to be somewhere between a stern warning and an outright ban across different regions and entities. Last week, authorities released a list of 6 do's and don'ts for organizations deploying OpenClaw. Among their suggestions were using the official version and minimizing internet access and permissions. Adoption is so pervasive that the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, which is basically their central bank, issued an official statement that they had no plans to deploy OpenClaw on their internal IT systems. Chinese media is now running OpenClaw horror stories regarding privacy leaks and financial screw-ups, with one user apparently giving their OpenClaw access to a credit card which was promptly run up to the limit. Wendy Chang, a senior analyst at the Mercator Institute for China Studies, believes that OpenClaw has a natural cultural resonance in China. She said most people view technology as a convenience, so when something new comes out, they're more willing to try it. Some have suggested OpenClaw being free and open source has a major role to play in its popularity. Many analysts have noted that Chinese tech firms have struggled to monetize their models among consumers, as the concept of software subscriptions is far less developed in the East. Stanford professor Graham Webster, who focuses on geopolitics and tech, but who before that was my hallmate and entrepreneurial collaborator at Northwestern back 20 years ago, suggested that the rise of OpenClaw could be a flashpoint for China's AI industry. Until now, any and all experiments have been encouraged under a formal regional initiative called AI+. However, the clear privacy and security concerns could trigger a rethink, according to Webster, who said, "It could be a moment that starts to cause the Chinese government to think about the downsides of widely available open models." It feels to me like there's an interesting story brewing here, although I'm still not exactly sure what it is and what it says about where we are, but it's something that I'm going to continue to pay attention to. One flag related to that: While in general, optimism about AI is way higher in China than it is in the US, there was a huge spike in the term AI anxiety on WeChat in February, peaking in mid-March as OpenClaw mania hit a crescendo. Tony Peng of Recode China wrote, "What is different this time is the mood. In those earlier waves, the mainstream mood was excitement, awe, and curiosity. This time, more and more people are expressing anxiety, fear, and concern." Tony argues that the most obvious reason is job insecurity. He writes, "For most ordinary people in China, AI still means chatbots. Claude Code or Codex is not available. There's no household AI agent with real penetration. Then, all of a sudden, media reports are claiming OpenClaw can handle a wide range of tasks autonomously, and the gap between what people knew and what they were being told deepened the sense of being left behind." In other words, even in a place with high AI optimism, the job displacement fear persists. Now, separately, Chinese authorities are taking a second look at Meta's acquisition of Manus. From the outset, it seemed that Manus had designed their corporate structure to circumvent controls on Chinese tech exports. The company relocated their headquarters from Beijing to Singapore in July of last year, shortly after they began taking capital from U.S. venture firms. Sources said that officials at China's National Development and Reform Commission called executives from Meta and Manus to a meeting last week to express concerns over the deal. Government actions remain unclear, but they appear to include an effort to bar Manus executives from departing China for Singapore. The New York Times discussed a range of different options that Chinese officials might pursue, including clawing back data exports or declaring the relocation unlawful. This could be a reaction to growing concerns about losing AI talent to the West. However, some analysts have suggested it's just a maneuver to create leverage ahead of trade talks later this month. Meta is trying to present themselves as unconcerned, with a spokesperson stating, "The transaction complied fully with applicable law. The outstanding team at Manus is now deeply integrated into Meta. We appreciate the appropriate resolution to the inquiry." And one last one on China, Nvidia says it's restarting production as Chinese export plans get back on track. Speaking at a press conference on Tuesday, Jensen Huang said, "We've been licensed for many customers in China. We've received purchase orders from many customers and we're in the process of restarting our manufacturing. Our supply chain is getting fired up." Now, the process for getting export approval for H200s has been an on-again, off-again affair since the idea was floated by President Trump back in December. The most recent chatter from the beginning of March was that Nvidia would shut down production and reallocate the fab time to producing next-generation Vera Rubin hardware. No single catalyst was attributed to the decision, but export plans have seen multiple setbacks from both Beijing and Washington in recent months. Huang suggested on Tuesday that the squabbling within the Trump administration had been settled, commenting, "President Trump's intention is that the United States should have a leadership position in access to Nvidia's best technology. However, he would like us to compete worldwide and not concede those markets unnecessarily." Reuters, meanwhile, reported that it's all systems go from the Chinese side as well. Sources familiar with the situation confirmed that Chinese authorities had granted approval for multiple companies to purchase H200s. Earlier reports suggested demand was staggering, with multiple Chinese firms placing orders for hundreds of thousands of chips. That demand could go towards explaining Huang's new forecast that Nvidia could see $1 trillion in sales by 2027. Lastly today, speaking of that big prediction from Jensen about revenue, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy also sees AI doubling revenue for AWS. According to Reuters sources, Jassy shared the lofty projection with staff at a recent all-hands. He said that over the long term, AI could boost annual sales for AWS to $600 billion, double his prior estimate. Jassy said, "I've been thinking for the last number of years that AWS, call it 10 years from now, could be a $300 billion annual revenue run rate business. I think what's happening in AI that AWS has a chance to be at least double that." AWS most recently booked $128 billion in sales for 2025, 19% growth from the prior year. And while the numbers that he's throwing around seem big, the prediction might not be all that extravagant. This would represent 17% annual growth for the coming decade. Analyst Patrick Moorhead writes, "In my view, this is the clearest signal yet that hyperscale cloud is entering a second growth phase that dwarfs the first. Net, AI is repricing the entire cloud total addressable market upward." Brock, meanwhile, points out, if AI genuinely doubles AWS revenue to $600 billion by 2036, then Amazon will emerge as one of the biggest beneficiaries of the entire AI build-out without even having to build the models themselves. Interesting stuff going on, but that is going to do it for today's headlines. Next up, the main episode.